Paul Goldschmidt is officially a New York Yankee. And does that mean Nolan Arenado is about to follow him to the Bronx? We're going to break down the Nolan Arenado or the Paul Goldschmidt signing and the Nolan Arenado news and potential joining of the two former Cardinal studs in New York on this episode of Deal in the Cards. Hey, Andrew, it's good to be back with you. We were just live on Thursday for the charity live stream. You can go check out that live stream over on our channel. We were co-hosted the event with Sandy and then Bernie Michaelis, which was just super fun. And we had a lot of awesome guests like Derek Gould of St. Louis Post Dispatch, Jeff Jones, Brooke Grimsley, Trevor Rosenthal. Kareem was on with us, Will Leach, Jim Hayes. I don't think I'm missing anyone. But it was a really fun event at 314 Sports Cards Collectibles.
Jeff Jones. I don't know.
Yeah, I said Jeff. I said Jeff Jones. It was a really awesome event, and we had to talk a little bit about some of this Goldie Arenado stuff that we'll touch on today. But I really want to highlight. I think a big highlight for us was there's just a really incredible baseball conversation between Bernie and Derek that we just posted on the channel as an individual video. If you just want to watch that interview, you can just watch the whole live stream as well. It was just like a lot of great conversation about what has led to this moment for the St. Louis Cardinals and what's to come. But then I think the real gold of the conversation was a lot of reflection regarding just kind of baseball life and some of the experiences that they've had. And Derek shared stories about running into like Bill Clinton at Shea Stadium, or they talked about the commissioner and some of the, like the incredible opportunities they've had in the game to work with incredible writers and then just meet amazing people along the way. And so it was an awesome conversation. The chat was just asking encore for more of it. Highly recommend watching that. And then also, before we get into the conversation, I think we should acknowledge the passing of Ricky Henderson today. That's a big loss for the baseball community. One of the legends of the game, one of the premier base stealers, one of the best Oakland Athletics there ever were, which I think is especially timely considering their move out of the city. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on today in the baseball world, but the biggest piece of news obviously is Paul Goldschmidt signing with the New York Yankees. And all of this is kind of like a domino effect of things that have happened this week, right? So you have the Nolan Arenado trade get blocked to Houston. Houston pivots and signs Christian Walker. The Yankees now pivot and sign Paul Goldschmidt, but it also is linked to the fact that they've been in heavy negotiations, or at least expressed heavy interest with the New York or with the St. Louis Cardinals regarding acquiring third baseman Nolan Arenado. We all know the story of Paul Goldschmidt, right? He won MVP in 2022. So he unites with AL MVP from 2022, Aaron Judge, on the same team. Last year in 2023 was a year for Paul Goldschmidt.
Fake MVP.
Whatever.
Anyway.
Okay. We're not having Shohei talk today. Aaron Judge was the MVP that year. And then 2023 was an okay year for Paul Goldschmidt, 20% above league average, but really kind of declined in the second half. And then obviously this past year, Goldie was a league average hitter, still plus or probably above average to plus defender at first base. Was a bottom six batter in all of baseball with runners in scoring position, which was just a big issue for him. The power was kind of zapped from his swing. Not a lot to like about Goldie's last year, but I think most people expect him to be better. So getting him on a 1 year, $12.5 million deal from the Yankees makes a lot of sense. They're pivoting off of Juan Soto. They've signed Max Fried, traded for Cody Bellinger, traded for Devin Williams. They're potentially about to trade for Nolan Arenado. Andrew, just quick reaction specifically to the fact that the Yankees have now brought in Paul Goldschmidt for their lineup.
Yeah, I think it's really important for them to get Paul Goldschmidt and just like spend some of that Soto money elsewhere, because they offered him, what was it, $760 million over something 16 years or something. Like I think it was 1 year more than the Mets gave him, and then like $5 million less or something, which I still think is a crazy overpay. And I think they're doing a lot better with the pieces that they've brought in outside of Soto, with like Max Fried and Devin Williams and now Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger. Like, I think they're still paying all of those collectively less next year than Juan Soto will get. And I can't imagine that those four players combined will be worth less than Juan Soto. But I think it's important for the Yankees to get that defense at first base that was sorely missing. Rizzo hasn't been the same player since his injury a couple of years ago. And I think if Paul Goldschmidt was playing first base in that fifth inning of the World Series, then the Yankees probably take the series back to LA. You know, like that's probably what ends up happening there. And because he just plays great fundamental defense. And is just one of the more underrated things about Paul Goldschmidt is just how much better he makes the infielders of a team that really has poor infielders, right? Like they're just not great from what we saw. And I mean, for the Cardinals, it was time to move off from him, and I'm glad that Goldie can go to one of the contenders. And I feel like the American League is definitely a lot worse than the National League. I would say the Yankees maybe like fourth or fifth best team in all of baseball right now, but probably the best team in the American League. I don't think Paul Goldschmidt's going to have any trouble getting back to the playoffs next year, and hopefully he can go and end his career well. But yeah, I'm happy for him, and honestly, not a Yankee hater, so I don't really care. I don't really care if he wins one in New York. I'll be rooting for him as long as my other team that I don't want to talk about is out first. But yeah, I like it, and I think Arenado is a good fit for them, so it would be pretty funny. Goldie was always my favorite out of the two. I don't think Arenado, like I never liked Arenado more than Goldie. I don't think there was ever a point in time where that was the case. So yeah, I'm happy that he's able to go there. If Arenado goes there too, I guess that's a little bit of a bonus. But it's cool to see that he can go to a place where he's almost certain to get to play in October again.
Yeah, I think that's the big piece, right? Like for the most part, it seems like Goldie and Nado, and rightfully so, are going to prioritize going to teams that they think are going to help them contend next year. Obviously, the Yankees were just in the World Series. You can make the argument that they had a pretty easy path toward the World Series playing the AL Central teams, but overall, they made it there. I think you brought up a really good point that, like, specifically highlighting that debacle they had in the World Series in that fifth inning. Like, you get Paul Goldschmidt at first base there. That's already like an upgrade defensively. Cody Bellinger in center field is, I think, a pretty average defensive center fielder at this point in his career, but he allows Judge to move to right field, which gives you a plus outfielder in right field now instead. If they end up going after Nolan Arenado, that's an upgrade defensively at third base. And so you could argue that this lineup is now deeper. It's not, I don't know if I would say it's better without Juan Soto, because having Juan Soto, Aaron Judge back to back is just a deadly combo. But now,
well, I'm not saying their lineup is better, because like they added to their rotation. They signed Fried, they got Williams. Like their pitching is significantly better than it was before.
Yeah, I'm long term. I'm really concerned about the amount of big contracts they have in the rotation. Rodon, Cole, and Fried, you're going to be paying an insane amount of money in a few years, but it's the Yankees. They're going for it now. They play at a different level of money. I would disagree with you on the fact that I don't think the aggregate of all these players is necessarily makes you a better team for the amount of money you pay for Juan Soto, because now you're in aggregate trying to get the same amount of value you had from one player out of four players. And I think you could have had this one player that's probably as valuable as these four players, and then to fill the roster spots with other guys that could give you surplus value. I would still rather have Juan Soto, but I think with that being said, they have rebounded in a fair way where, like, if you told me they were going to lose Juan Soto, but they end up with Max Fried, Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt, Devin Williams, and potentially Nolan Arenado now too. That's a pretty good pivot, if we're being honest with the Yankees here. You look at their potential lineup now. I'm just going to let's, like, for a second, let's talk about, or like, what it would look like if you get Nolan Arenado, because I think it is a lot more likely now. You've got a lineup that looks like Jazz Chisholm, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Giancarlo Stanton, Austin Wells, Anthony Volpe, Jason Dominguez. Like,
it is really funny that Stanton, Goldschmidt, and Arenado could all be teammates. And
yeah,
well, if you had told me that in like 2018, I would have been really excited.
Yeah. Well, this team in 2022 would have been insane. You'd have two top three NL MVP finishers and Aaron Judge in the lineup, plus Jazz Chisholm, who's coming up at the time. Bellinger, I think that was one of his bad years, but still.
That was one of his bad years, yeah.
But still, it's like they have a lot of names right now, and they're not just like, I think most people expect Bellinger to be a little bit better next year. I think the same Goldschmidt, same with Arenado. So they're like buying low on some guys too, which I think is interesting. They're not necessarily like, I mean, I'd rather sign Santander, but it's like they're not going after the big flashy guys who just came off career years. They're kind of trying to get bargains on some guys right now.
They should sign Dylan Carlson to replace Soto. It would be so funny.
Honestly, I mean, I feel like they, for a long time, were rumored on Dylan Carlson at deadlines. And so, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that. Especially because they kind of need some left-handed. Well, actually, no, sorry, the opposite. He actually would play to their strengths right now. They have a lot of guys that can hit left-handed pitching, not a lot of guys that can hit right-handed, or not a lot of lefties besides Bellinger and Jazz at this point. But Anyways, overall, I think it's a really interesting move for them to sign him. $12.5 million for Paul Goldschmidt, not bad. And honestly, if the Cardinals are trying to win next year and not cut payroll, I would be like, why aren't they signing him for $12.5 million on 1 year? I don't like that's a good bargain. Again, the defense alone at first base is probably worth a decent amount there. And then the fact that you probably think Paul Goldschmidt's gonna be a little bit better than above or a little bit better than league average at the plate. Interesting to me. But yeah, I think overall, what the big news to me here is that if Paul Goldschmidt signed at the Brewers, if he signed with the Diamondbacks, if he signed with wherever, it really doesn't affect St. Louis, right? Well, I mean,
I wouldn't like it if he was on the Brewers. That would just be bad.
Yeah,
but they brought Hoskins back, so I didn't think that was going to happen.
I'm more so mean like there's pretty much all the other potential teams he could have signed with doesn't impact St. Louis other than they play that team. The fact that he went to New York now opens up even more so the fact that Arenado could be there. And so that does impact the Cardinals because now it increases the likelihood of the New York wanting to push for him, increases potentially the likelihood of Nolan Arenado saying, yes, I would like to go to New York. We've talked about it, but then we also just had both Jeff Jones and Derek Gould on the podcast on Thursday. And I think Gould really highlighted like, sure, he would love to go to Los Angeles or San Diego, but both of those options don't feel likely unless either of them kind of change their posture. Houston is now out of the equation with the Christian Walker addition. So that's another kind of off the board. And so you're really looking for like Paul Goldschmidt or for Nolan Arenado at this point. It's like Philadelphia if they can move Alec Boehm or if they're really intent on Nado, which I don't know how like aggressive they are. You have the Angels, which again is a pretty lateral move in terms of contention, but again, it is closer to home. But I would say it's probably toward the bottom of his preferred list. I mean, anyways, then the whole idea of a list, like if I say list, I'm not alluding to this actual list he has. Like I'm talking about places that Nado would weigh. I think Ellie's probably a little bit lower. But then it's like, okay, so the Mets are probably up there, but then I think it's really probably Boston and the Yankees at this point, and both have a former teammate of his. Boston has Trevor Story. New York has a Nolan or a Paul Goldschmidt at this point. So I think we're really starting to see the options for Arenado here. And then what's really important here is the Cardinals clearly want to move him as soon as possible, but it's kind of Arenado that's been slowing down the market right now. Now, really, once Alex Bregman signs, I think clearly Arenado will be like traded quickly. But honestly, a trade could happen soon now because I don't think the Yankees are in on Bregman. So maybe Arenado's waiting to see what the Red Sox do. I don't know. Let's talk about that trade here in a second, though. First, I want to thank some of our sponsors of the podcast. First, one of our new sponsors is we're partnering with Underdog Sports. It's our favorite place to play fantasy games. You got to check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. You just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can get 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. If that sounds like fun, sign up and use our promo code CARDS to claim your free first Pick'em and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries.
Who's not going 5 for 5?
Me.
Paul Goldschmidt.
Or Paul Goldschmidt. Yeah, that's what we have in common. But yeah, there's a lot of football to pick right now. Sandy's been on like just doing really well with college basketball picks and such. So yeah, if you've never tried Underdog before, it's a really fun way to play fantasy sports. Use our promo code CARDS again for first time free pick and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Yeah, use our code CARDS for that. And then also we want to thank 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles, who we had the charity live stream at this past week. They're located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturdays. Buy, sell, and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards. They have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars around the league. You can snag that Ace card. Well, I guess Andrew already did, but that's some pretty nice stuff. I got a Derek Gould signed baseball card now from him from the store, which is pretty sweet. So thanks, Derek, for signing those for us. It was a part of a set back in 2020, it looks like. So that's pretty legit. I think they've got more of these cards in store potentially you can purchase. I'm not sure.
Who do you like more, Derek Gould's card or Caleb Williams' card, Josh?
Because it's signed and it's Derek, I'm going Derek. But 314 did hook me up with the Caleb Williams card, so I do appreciate that. And this super special Shelby Miller numbered card that I really like. Shelby's one of my favorite Cardinals, so loving that. Had some pretty good fun polls. We ripped some packs while we were there, and so I snagged this in this Ichiro card that I thought looked pretty sick. And then a Randy Johnson card that I thought was pretty cool. So, yeah, yeah, go check out 3-4. They're an awesome friends of the podcast, and they just have a lot of really cool stuff in there. Derek was like checking out all their stuff out there. Some of you came in and watched the live stream live, which was fun, and it just seemed like people really enjoy the store. It's my first time in person, and people really love it. And Andrew frequents it, so make sure to check out 314. But Andrew, at this point, Nato, like, how likely do you think it is he ends up in New York?
I think it's less if he wants to go to New York, because I think he would now at this point, to play with Goldie. And I don't know, like, it seems like the two of them were close even before he ended up in St. Louis, and that was probably one of the big reasons he wanted to come to St. Louis, is because he and Goldie were national team teammates back in 2017, and I mean, they played in the same division together for the better part of a decade, and I think it makes sense for him to want to go there. It's just a matter of whether the Yankees want him or if they're going to try to pivot somewhere else at third base. Because right now, you look at the Yankees lineup top to bottom, they at least have an established major league player who is like an above average bat at every position, barring like Anthony Volpe at short, but he's kind of like a defense first kind of guy who like is one of the guys that you're a little bit afraid of on the base paths, right? Like the Yankees generally, the whole Dodgers thing in the World Series was put the ball in play. And the Yankees
Volpe has upside.
Yeah, and he has upside to become that eventually. So, but like the Yankees, like the scouting report the Dodgers got in the World Series was put the ball in play and the Yankees will unravel. Volpe was one of those guys that you were kind of thinking that was like, oh, he's probably not going to do that. But he also made a really bad play in that inning. He threw the ball away to Chisholm, but he's like the only real like defense first guy in that lineup. But like the real hole is at third base, where you have Oswaldo Cabrera projected as their third baseman, with Jazz Chisholm at second base, which is more a natural position for him. And I mean, I'm not as well versed in some of the Yankees younger guys, but I don't think Cabrera has nearly as much upside. And I think they will try to upgrade there because they have the payroll space to do it. They still have money left over from Soto. So, I think it makes sense. Barring Bregman, I don't know who else would be readily available on that market to do at third base. But I definitely think that it is a good fit for the Yankees, but there could be clubhouse concerns, right? They had Josh Donaldson for a while there, and he wasn't a great clubhouse personality to have. But they also have leaders like Judge as the captain, and Stanton probably balance that out, that the Cardinals don't really have. And yeah, I think it would be cool at this point. I'm all for it. I want him as far away from the Dodgers as possible because I just don't want to watch him play again. And yeah, I think it's a decent fit. It's just whether or not the Yankees actually want him.
Yeah, and also too, I don't really think like I don't like comparing Nolan Arenado to Josh Donaldson. I know you weren't necessarily doing that, but like
not really, but like yeah.
Stuff, like Nolan Arenado's not a clubhouse cancer. I just think the problem is, well, I'm not you. If you want to have that take, that's fine. I don't think he's a clubhouse cancer. I think the problem
he kind of admitted it too. Like he kind of spoke with the press and was like, "I don't want to be a clubhouse cancer," which kind of implies that he was at some point.
No, okay, I don't even think he used those words. I think he said he wanted to be a little bit more present and better reporting to the young guys. I think there's not. I don't think it's just you're either a clubhouse leader, a neutral guy, or a cancer. I think you could be like slightly negative, but I don't think it means he's like Josh Donaldson here. Yeah. I think it's the problem. Like when you go to a team where you have Aaron Judge as the clear leader, and then you've got plenty of other guys who are going to kind of, I mean, like then you have Paul Goldschmidt now is like that neutral positive presence where he's not necessarily a vocal leader, but he's definitely not a negative to the clubhouse. I mean, I know you've got Jazz Chisholm's personality and such, but I think Nato would fit in well there with that team because of the fact that he's not going to be asked to lead the team. And I think he will be a positive presence on a winning club like New York. I think the problem is when you're on a team, like no one was complaining about Nolan Arenado in 2022 with the Cardinals or 2021. It was in 2022.
Yachty and Waino and Pujols were there, so.
But that's not 2021. Yeah. It was Yachty and Waino, but like Pujols came in 2023, 2022. But like my point is, like they were winning, and the Nato stuff where he's kind of like sulking and really frustrating himself and all, it's not as big of a deal when it's just not really present because you're winning. And I think that will be a thing in New York, is that especially if he bounces back and plays a little bit better, but then also the team I doubt will be bad next year. They'll have bad stretches. Every team does, but I think Nolan will be fine. He'll fit in well. This is the exact kind of opportunity he should want to go to. The New York market scares me a little bit for him, but the fact you have Aaron Judge is he's the Yankees captain, right? Right? Like this, he's a Derek Jeter type. Like Judge will run the clubhouse. Aaron Boone, I think, is a decent manager. I think I think he'll take some of that heat. You got Paul Goldschmidt there, Giancarlo Stanton, like Cody Bellinger. Like you've got plenty of other personalities that Nato can kind of blend in and just play baseball. And I think that's what he wants to do. So I think from that standpoint, it helps out a lot. I do think, like, to your point, they don't have a lot of like defense first guys, but I think they do have a lot of defensive guys. Like Aaron Judge is a great defender in the corners. Jazz Chisholm is a lot in the corners. Yeah. I mean, that's where he'll be. And like center field, we can, like, everyone likes to mock someone for the one moment, but he was a good defensive center fielder. He just wasn't like, or at least average. Yeah. He wasn't like bad. He just had that bad play. And it sucks. but anyways, he'll be in the right field now, and that's a great position for him. Cody Bellinger in left field or center field is probably, anyways, outfield defense will be better. Jazz Chisholm goes back to second base. Well, I don't know if it's a clear upgrade over Anthony Rizzo, but I think they do get better at first base defensively. Paul Goldschmidt, Wells is a good defensive catcher. Volpe's a good defensive shortstop. Honestly, in a lot of ways, the things that they were getting kind of trashed on by the Dodgers personnel about not being very good at the fundamentals and focusing on things like, I mean, just defense in general, I think is something that the Yankees have taken to heart and have really looked to upgrade this offseason. I always get afraid about investing high-level pitching. Just like, I do like Max Fried. I think he'll be good, but like, and on paper, the rotation could be awesome with Cole, Fried, Rodon, Schmidt, other stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think here's something we can keep talking about that, but I think Kareem brings a good point. We didn't really address it that much, but I think we should talk about the Marcus Strowman type of thing. How did we feel about the idea that the Cardinals were offered Strowman and basically shot down immediately? And is that something they should maybe consider if they're going to move on from a Steven Matz or an Eric Fetty? I've got my take, but Andrew, what do you think about the Marcus Strowman side of things? We've touched on it, but not fully dove into it.
I feel like you need to get something back for Arenado, and I don't think Strowman is getting anything back. Because to be honest, like it's a bad contract by the Yankees, what they gave him. And he just hasn't been great. Like he was relegated to the bullpen for all of the playoffs. And he was relegated to the bullpen for a lot of the season too, because the Yankees just have that strong of a rotation. And I think it, like, if you want clubhouse guys, Marcus Strowman is not the guy to go get. And if you want, like, a part of the reason I feel like is to, like, make the clubhouse a better place for some of the young guys by moving Arenado. And if you bring in Marcus Strowman, you're not really doing anything for the clubhouse, right? He's not like the best personality. I think he and Miles Michaelis genuinely hate each other, which from his Cubs days, because they, like, I don't know, but he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that the Cardinals would like gel with. And there's other guys that you can go and get, like Kyle Gibson on the market, who work well in that clubhouse. And like Strowman is a lateral move for the rotation. And I would probably rather have like Steven Matz in there than Strowman. So you need to go and like eat some of the money and get like a decent prospect back in return from a different team or from the Yankees. And that's fine. But I'm not a fan of the personality fit. His numbers aren't great. And I want something like that has upside for the future, not something that like kind of has upside for next year.
Yeah, I mean, so in totality, I agree with you that I didn't love the Strowman side of things, but I actually kind of disagree with the thought process there. I think if you're looking for upside, Strowman actually is more upside than Kyle Gibson, or has more upside than Steven Matz. Like, we've seen what Strowman can do last year, or 2 years ago. Sorry, he was a all-star. He really fell apart in the second half, but 3.95 ERA. Again, was a lot better in the first half. It was like a Cy Young kid in the first half. 2021, he made 33 starts at the Mets, had a 3.02 ERA. 2022, made 25 starts at the Cubs, 3.50 ERA. FIPS looked really nice in those years. xERA, like, wasn't necessarily like a smoke and mirrors guy. He's a ground ball guy. The Cardinals love that. Again, they've had the opportunity to go after Strowman before, and it sounds like they were not wanting to. I'm not trying to sell people Marcus Strowman, but I think there is, like, Well, here, let me pause that there. I think there's some upside with him. The Cardinals clearly want to move payroll, right? Like they're not trying to, as much as I thought they would do it, they clearly have. When you look at the Astro side of things, they were more concerned with getting rid as much of Arenado's contract as possible than to eat enough money to go get something real. And I don't think Strowman lines up with those goals. Now, for a fan and just kind of following the team, like I don't think any of us need to celebrate them getting rid of money. Like that affects their pocketbooks. It doesn't help the team. And so, like in theory, getting Strowman could help the team because what if you acquire Strowman and he has a really good year this year and he's like a number 3 starter? You could flip him at the deadline. Like that in theory is acquiring something that could help you. And if it doesn't work out, it's just money you're paying him. And if his option doesn't invest for 2026, then you just let him go. But it doesn't seem like they want to do that. And that's where I just don't think Marcus Stroman makes sense for them because I don't think they're going to want that kind of money. In theory, if his option doesn't invest for 2026, then you're only paying him $3 million more than what you're going to eat on Nolan's contract. But you're paying him all that up front in 1 year rather than kicking in $5 million for 2025, 2026, 2027 and spreading out that money that you're eating over multiple years, which I think is probably more appealing to the Cardinals than eating it all up front. And there's also the fact that if he vests his option, if he throws 140 innings, then you owe him $18 million next year too. And then you're eating $36 million instead of $15 million. And so that's where I just don't think Marcus Stroman makes sense for what they're trying to do. And I understand, like, that's why I was not shocked to hear that they outright just block the trade and they didn't even bring it to Nolan. They weren't even like, hey, the Yankees will trade for you if we take Marcus Stroman. They're like, yeah, no, we're not doing that because that's the power they have in this too. Will the now what I'm curious to see is what happens. Like, do the Yankees try to send Marcus Stroman elsewhere and then acquire Arenado? Do they figure out a way to like weirdly eat some money on the contracts to make it work for both sides? Do the Yankees just hold on to Strowman, acquire Arenado? Cardinals kick in 15 million, and that's that. Like, I don't know what it is. But I think if the Cardinals are not willing to go out and take like I don't know, like enough money on to get something in return, then Strowman actually makes a little bit of sense to me because of the fact you could end up flipping him later. But in overall, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't see the Cardinals wanting Strowman to your point. I do think for some reason, well, not for some reason, I think they have legitimate concerns about Strowman in the clubhouse. And I think they do want the vibes to be as good as possible for 2025. And I don't know if Strowman necessarily helps you with that. But I think talent for talent, like you're potentially buying low on Strowman and be able to flip him later, which I think helps the team. But I think in the best possible thing is you get, you eat money on his deal and you get a prospect that helps, nothing like top 100 guy or even probably a top 10 guy in the system, but something that at least you maybe could dream on later. Like we saw Matt, like I think a better case version than Matt Savonson, but like the Cardinals basically just dumped Paul Dionne's money at a deadline and got a guy who's going to be a helpful reliever for them next year now, Matt Savonson. Could they do something a little bit better than that for Nolan Arenado? That's what they should be aiming for in my eyes. Now, this is interesting, like the LeMahieu contract. Maybe that's something that the Yankees try to send the Cardinals. But again, I don't think that makes sense unless the Yankees want to eat money on that too. Because if I'm not wrong, he's due $15 million this year and $15 million next year. And again, I think that kind of defeats the purpose of the Cardinals. Yeah, $15 million in 2026, and that's guaranteed. So I kind of defeats the purpose of the Cardinals wanting to eat money here, and that also defeats the purpose of the Yankees shedding money because the Cardinals aren't going to take that full contract. Also, again, Nolan played with DJ in Colorado, so that might be another appealing factor for him to play with DJ in New York rather than have him gone. But does that make sense to you? Like my thought process about Strowman potentially being a little bit more of a high upside acquiring. Okay, so here I was trying to get this earlier. Over from 2021 to 2023, his averages per year was a 3.45 ERA, 120 ERA plus guy, 3.60 FIP guy. Like again, he was a bad year last year in New York, but we've also seen like Sonny Gray go to New York and struggle before. So it's not like the craziest thing in the world for a guy to struggle with the Yankees in their first year. But
yeah, I mean, I just think it's because Strowman's a little bit older, and like I'm not sure. I thought it was just age regression, but yeah, it makes sense that he's more like high upside than like a Kyle Gibson. But I feel like Kyle Gibson will also just be a cheaper option if you wanted to go that route, and then you could eat more of Arenado's money and get get something else in return, because I just don't think Strowman will help this team past like next year. And I don't know if that's what they should be going after. And I also just don't think that's a good clubhouse fit. Because I'm pretty sure part of the Arenado thing is just to let the young guys play. Because honestly, like if you're trying to contend next year, like for real, like they're trying to say, like we're going to try to be good next year, keeping Arenado makes a bit of sense, right? Because you're not going to get anything for him next year.
Yeah.
But I understand why they're moving off of him to give like JC a look, or to give Gorman a look at third, and which I'm not a fan of Gorman at third, but whatever. Maybe they'll move Walker back to third instead, and they'll do something.
Oh wait, no.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. I was just like, they tend to just mismanage their young guys, which is whatever. I don't like Walker at third either. I think it should be Donovan at third, Gorman at second. Just whatever. But I mean, I think they should just trade Eric Fetty regardless of whatever happens. But if taking on Strowman means you can trade Eric Fetty, I'm a little bit more for it, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see what evolves. And I mean, obviously, like again, Nato is one of the interesting factors here, because he's the one who purposely slowed down his own trade market a little bit. But if he's open to go to New York, I could see this happening in the next 24 to 72 hours, right? Because I mean, just think about the chain of events that led to this, right? Nato blocks a trade to Houston. A day and a half later, they signed Christian Walker. A day later, the Yankees signed Paul Goldschmidt because they were going after Christian Walker. Like, I think this stuff can like really quickly dominoes start falling. I really do think it matters. Like, what are the final teams that are in on Alex Bregman right now, and how many of those teams are potential Nato destinations? The big one that makes sense to me is Boston, but at this point, I feel like New York is probably a little bit more appealing than Boston for Nolan Arenado. I mean, I know they have Trevor Story, but and maybe he's closer friends to Trevor Story, and maybe he thinks the Red Sox are sending him. And I mean, honestly, like long term, they are. You have that farm system that looks like a better situation.
Yeah. People tell me that the guy who built that farm system is not good, but whatever.
Well, those people are dead wrong, because I'm so happy that guy's in St. Louis right now, Chaim Bloom. And honestly, I think if we're going live tomorrow still, I think we should talk a little bit about maybe some of that, because Derek Gold had a really good podcast with Jeff Pontes from Baseball America, and they had a really good conversation about Bloom, farm system, a lot of stuff that's changing. Like, it's really exciting. And also they really, I mean, I don't want to, this will be the last thing. It's like Bloom's starting off at a stronger position with the Cardinals farm system than he did with the Red Sox. Like, the Red Sox were decimated when he got there, and he built them into a powerhouse. And now the Cardinals are in like kind of a mid-tier farm system with some really interesting talent. I'm excited about what Bloom can do. But anyways, that doesn't really affect the Nato stuff. I mean, you make a good point about like, I do think the Strowman's personality probably can matter for a young clubhouse. And the appeal of Cal Gibson is that he could pour into a Michael McGreevy, a Quinn Matthews, Tim Kent's, those type of guys when they come up. Strowman, I just don't know what his personality is like for that. So doesn't necessarily seem like that's his cup of tea. He probably seems more like he wants to win and have fun doing it. And probably likes the New York market compared to St. Louis. But again, I'm just kind of speculating here. I'm not going to talk poorly of the guy. I don't know him. But yeah, I think Kyle Gibson fits more of the mold of what they're trying to get from the rotation next year. I just think the upside with Strowman's higher than Steven Matz, Kyle Gibson, those type of names right now. And so if the Cardinals are going to get nothing in return for Nato and just eat money, then that's where I'm like, well, maybe you consider Strowman, because at worst case, you just basically like eating money, and best case, he becomes an asset for you later. But overall, because of what the Cardinals' priorities are right now, I don't see them doing that. I just think like the reason we're advocating against it is because it's more money for the most part, and like all that really does is help the DeWitt's pocketbooks. And we don't know. We have no reason right now to really have confidence and trust that they're going to reinvest it into the club in 2026.
They'll reinvest into an Arby's, maybe.
And to be fair, I mean, they are reinvesting it into the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And it's some infrastructure things that do matter. And like, I'm so glad they're doing that. And like Jeff Jones just had a great story over on the Belleville News. Like they are really revamping the spring training stuff, and there's a lot of costs there. And I really recommend that because it kind of gives you some of the ownership structure stuff too of other owners besides the DeWitts that are involved with the Cardinals that I think are just fascinating.
Are they backfilling their front office positions though, Josh? I don't know.
Oh gosh,
Not sure.
but also too, like, they did take revenue losses. Like, I have a little bit. Like, we'll each put this really well, I think, on our podcast on the charity live stream. Like, I can have grace and understanding for the fact that they did lose a lot of money, and that like any business, like if you own a small business and you're watching right now, like, I mean, I know it's different when you own a baseball team. I totally understand that. So like, I agree they should be trying to go win it, but like, I understand a little bit that they're trying to cut costs a little bit and make up for the fact they lost money. With that being said, I'm not defending it because I say I don't trust that just because you move this Nato money means in 2026, 2027, you're going to move payroll back up. And I think Bernie's had really been on this for a while, that the payroll number doesn't matter if they're winning. But I do think in a market like St. Louis, you shouldn't be having a payroll like the Brewers or the Guardians or the Rays. That you should be doing what they're doing really well and investing into the Major League club. And right now, I don't have confidence that they move that money. It benefits fans that much. So anyways, that's all that. Any other lasting things on Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt?
Well, if the Yankees get both of them, that would be fun. But yeah, well, we'll see how the offseason goes, and I'm glad we have something to kind of talk about today. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the American League right now, like, it's pretty weak. So like, honestly, I'd probably say like the three AL East teams right now, it's Baltimore, it's New York, and Boston on the rise. And I'm like, those are the teams I'm looking at. Cleveland, obviously, too. And then in the West, it's like maybe the Mariners if they actually get aggressive, but the Astros seem to take a step back. So like, for both Nato and Goldie, the path to a World Series, New York might honestly be the smartest place to go. So yeah, and we'll see what happens with all that. Really appreciate everyone who tuned into this, like a quick emergency pod regarding Nato and Goldschmidt. I think we'll be live tomorrow still.
We'll try to be live.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about this if there's any updates. Otherwise, we've got some other Cardinals topics. There's some Eric Fetty and Steven Matz news about some potential suitors there, and Ryan Helsley too, about teams who've called on them. Doesn't mean the Cardinals will move specifically Fetty and Helsley, but there are some suitors out there. We'll talk about maybe some farm system Heim Bloom stuff, and kind of keep tabs on what's happening in the Cardinals offseason. Really appreciate all the support. Again, go check out the charity live stream. Some really cool stuff from that. Also, make sure to go check our Twitter, because if you donated and haven't figured out if you won yet, I think there's some people we haven't heard from yet that have won some items. So make sure to check that out. Really appreciate the support. As always, like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. We really appreciate all the support. We'll be live tomorrow. See you guys.
Thanks, Paul.